I'm so happy to introduce our Ruth Broyde Sharone, our longtime Mastery Circle member, author and producer of Interfaith Musical, longtime very active member of the interfaith community. And she has brought us a panel of women, and it'll be telling your story and the threat. So I will just turn that over to you, Ruth.
Good morning, everyone. It's always a beautiful way to start the day with Mastery Circle. And such dear, wonderful people in this group that I've known for so many years. And this morning, I would like you to think about what constitutes your life and your civilization, and how do you perpetuate it and transmit it. So before we had Netflix, and before MTV, and before the Gutenberg press, and going way, 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 way back, we had the campfire. And the reason we know about all the different societies that existed before the press and so forth is because of oral history. And so civilization was not just dependent upon planting seeds so that we could eat, but civilization was dependent upon the stories that were told. And I come from a tradition, the Jewish tradition, which the oral stories are as integral to who we are as our Bible, as our Tanakh. And as a matter of fact, until these stories were written down and codified and then studied for thousands of years by rabbis and sages who tried to understand how this all happened and why we're still here and what is our purpose, there was the oral tradition. But I remember hearing a few years ago, Vandana Shiva, Dr. Vandana Shiva, said that if it weren't for women saving seeds, as well as the story, there would be no civilization, because there were a lot of wars in ancient times, just like there are now. I understand there are 30 wars all over the world right now. But when a civilization was about to be wiped out and just a few stragglers were left, the only way they could continue was the women had saved seeds, and that allowed them to plant crops, and that allowed them to eat. And so it was primarily the women who took up the task and felt the responsibility of not just planting and cooking and serving, but saving seeds. And I believe that the seeds that have been saved are not just the ones that we ended up eating as food, but the seeds of our identity and of our connection. And you know, every child, when they get to the age where they start asking their parents questions about the family, are so hungry for stories so that they can place themselves in the world. And we each have a unique story that no one else in the entire world has. And so I decided that I wanted to ask 4 exceptional women to discuss the topic of saving seeds and storytelling for survival. And so what you're going to see this morning are parts 1 and 2 of a series that I created for the Parliament of the World's Religions. And Dana was very, very helpful. And when I decided to interview all these women, they were at 4 different places in the world. And Dana helped me record it and then worked on the editing with me. And so part of the reason you're seeing this here today is in gratitude to Dana, and to have a chance to share with you and have you think about your own personal stories vis-a-vis civilization and your family history. So this week, I'll be sharing parts 1 and 2, and we'll have discussion after that. And next week, I'll share parts 3 and 4. So Dana, I'm going to ask you to begin with part 1. I look forward to hearing your comments. We'll screen them 1 and 2, I think, right after each other, and then we'll go to discussion. Welcome. Today you're going to hear a woman's perspective on saving seeds and storytelling for survival. Historically, women have had a very vital role in sustaining civilization, but that role has been vastly underrated. Actually, women have been responsible for reconstituting and revitalizing societies that have been perhaps doomed if it had not been for their ability to save seeds and to tell stories. And that is what we're here to do today, because it's not just reproduction which has allowed society and civilization to continue, but it's actually the very seeds that have been saved for replanting to grow food, and the stories that have been told about our ancestry, our tribal history, our faith, our practices, which has kept us alive. I am Ruth Broyde Sharone, and now I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. These are extraordinary women of depth and substance, each one a trailblazer and a leader in her own field. These are women also of diverse ethnic, religious, racial, and cultural background. And I'd like to introduce them now to you. First, Audrey Kitagawa, Doctor of Jurisprudence of Japanese ancestry, is the president and founder of the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation and president of the Light of Awareness International Spiritual Family. She has been listed in Who's Who of American Law, Who's Who of American Women, Who's Who in America, in the World, and Prominent People of Hawaii. Welcome, Audrey. Next, I'd like to introduce to you Yolanda Nava, author of 2 highly acclaimed inspirational books, It's All in the Frijoles and Through the Dark. She is a civil rights and media pioneer, an Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, a cultural bridge builder, and the founder of the very first TV station in the US owned and operated by Mexican-American women. Next, Dr. Anita Sanchez, of Bois and Aztec and Mexican-American heritage. She is a consultant, trainer for corporations, education, and global nonprofits. Author of international award-winning book, The 4 Sacred Gifts, Indigenous Wisdom for Modern Times. She bridges indigenous wisdom and science for business and societal renewal. Born in the Caribbean, Dr. Claire Nelson, named by Forbes as one of the top 50 female futurists in the world, is the award-winning author of Smart Futures for a Flourishing World and an advocate for enhancing the role of the interfaith community through her ministry at the Tacoma Metaphysical Chapel in Maryland. So today we're going to explore not just the literal meaning, but also the metaphorical aspect of saving seeds and storytelling. In fact, in my tradition, I'm Jewish. Telling stories is a form of saving seeds for survival. And it actually says in our Torah, in the Bible, it doesn't just urge us to tell stories, it actually commands us to tell the story of the Exodus every year on the holiday of Passover. It says, and you shall tell your children and your children's children that I brought you out of the land of Egypt from slavery into freedom. You wandered in the wilderness for 40 years and received the revelation at Mount Sinai and the 10 Commandments. We have been telling that story every year on Passover. It has become such an important holiday that, as a matter of fact, in 1989, His Holiness the Dalai Lama called together a group of rabbis of all denominations from all over America to come and be with him in Dharamsala, India. He wanted to know what was the secret technique for Jewish survival. How did we manage to stay around for 3,500 years? And you know, rabbis usually don't agree on anything. 2 Jews, 3 opinions, we laugh and say about ourselves. But the rabbis all concurred that the annual retelling of the story of the Exodus was one of the secrets for survival. And His Holiness was justifiably concerned because the Tibetan people had no homeland anymore. They were scattered around the world, and he wanted to know what was the best way to keep that culture alive. And so, what does saving seeds and storytelling for survival mean to you personally and for your community? Let's start with Dr. Claire Nelson.
I see myself as a storyteller. And it's important I begin there because I stuttered for most of my life very badly. But I found when I performed, I didn't stutter. So story and storytelling became a way of me expressing me through an alter ego personality that existed as part of me. I discovered storytelling for social change at a Salzburg seminar on issues of race and ethnicity and conflict. So we're there as people from South Africa, Latin America, the Balkans, had just been come out of a war. And I latched on this idea of telling a story about the future, how peace was brought to the world. And by telling this story in a folktale form, using Anansi, which is a character which is very much known, and it turned out that Grandmother Spider is very much known also for Native Americans in the United States. It turned out that the two of us who decided to go forward, myself and a woman from indigenous people in USA, told our stories back in the days before PowerPoint, so she drew up these characters, etc. And lo, a new personality around storytelling for social change was born. And so in my book, Smart Futures for a Flourishing World, I use the same device. I use storytelling to share what it is we ought to be thinking about. And by going to the future and collecting stories from the future that we're now co-creating, I talk about these stories that we're writing being seeds of hope. So we're planting in our consciousness the hope that we have to have, and the outpicturing of what it is our hope and our working together across all the boundaries and borders by which we divide ourselves, what it is we can make if we can do that. And so for me, this idea, seeds, seed storing, seed recovery, seed replanting, and storytelling is something that for me goes hand in hand in terms of creating the future that I would like to see us do together.
Thank you so much. Yolanda, will you go next, please?
Thank you. I'm just very honored and delighted to be part of this panel with such remarkable women. The subject is so important. We're living in very challenging, frightening times, and it is the feminine that needs to be attended to and listened to, and we need to assume our rightful place as the people who direct public policy, who continue to perform leadership, to be peacemakers, to be storytellers. We do this in our families, but we have to do more of it in the larger world. We need to be listened to because we are the carriers of tradition, we're the carriers of virtue, we're the carriers of the stories of survival and how we can come to thrive. And we are the people that teach the principles of living to our families. And we need to keep doing that in the world, which is what we're doing here today and what many initiatives are throughout the United States and the world. It's interesting because I became, I guess, the person I am, and without realizing it, I came into storytelling through journalism and later through wisdom that my mother passed on to me as she was dying. And once I realized why my mother was a very strong woman. She was very spiritual. She was older when I was born. And so with that wisdom and the fact that she had been on her own personal spiritual journey, she became a student of Mary Baker Eddy, who was the discoverer and founder of Christian Science and the Christian Science Monitor newspaper, a Pulitzer Prize winning newspaper, to injure no man, to bless all mankind. That was the mission of the newspaper. And being very spiritual, my mother brought her own background into her storytelling and her life lessons that she passed on to me. My parents are both from Chihuahua, Mexico. They migrated al norte after the Mexican Revolution. So I am European and indigenous, Spanish and indigenous from Chihuahua, Mexico. And I have Apache blood as well that I can specifically identify through my father's mother. And I didn't know this until, I was a little bit older. But I love all this that I am, and the DNA throws a few other little things in there too. But my grounding has been in my mother's spiritual teachings. She taught me the virtues that are supported and taught, and the stories that are told to people who come from Spanish-speaking backgrounds, particularly Mexico and other Latin American countries and Spain. And these virtues are common ground for all of us. They're universal principles. And we'll talk more about what those virtues are in a bit, but it was my mother's daily instruction. She took it upon herself to shape me. She felt that she was to shape my character, and her way of doing that was through the teaching of the virtues: responsibility, respect, hard work, loyalty, faith, all the way to chastity and charity. There was some controversy about the chastity chapter in 2000 when It's All in the Frijoles, my award-winning book, came out. But I tell you that it saves and protects both the male and the female. And it's to be considered. It's to live to be clean of life and body, of mind and body. So the stories that she told me were very powerful. And she did it through the saying of Proverbs. And she also did it by teaching me about God. God is first and foremost. We are made in the image and likeness of God, is what I was taught. And that we are reflections of this infinite, all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful spirit, unseen, of course, and that we have the ability to draw from those qualities of spirit, those qualities that comprise, I think there are 99 or 100 qualities of God from which we can draw. And this is very empowering. And I was also taught over the course of my own spiritual study that thoughts are things. Somebody mentioned co-creator. Yes, we are co-creators. And what we think today is going to bring about what happens tomorrow. And so the storytelling becomes very powerful. And I'm just very excited about this.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. Audrey, I'm going to ask you to go next, please.
Well, thank you so much, Ruth, for this opportunity. And I really want to express my deepest appreciation for your invitation to participate in this discussion with such an august group of women, some of whom I have admired for many years for their powerful work. And I feel so privileged to be with all of you today. Thank you. There are many highly conscious and aware people in the world who really understand the need to save seeds. And a great example is the creation of seed banks as a form of insurance against the possibility of extinction of valuable seeds, 40% of which are estimated to be at risk for extinction. And a seed bank maximizes the number of plant species we can save from this fate due to the ever-increasing risks of climate change that is causing the extinction of important biodiversity and species at the rate of 150 to 200 plant and animal species every day. There's some controversy about the rate of extinction, but it is irrefutable that the extremes of climate change are causing extinctions in alarming numbers. And this loss of biodiversity is something that we must really prevent. And I was born and raised in Hawaii, and Hawaii has also begun creating seed banks to conserve seeds for future generations to mitigate against drought, fire, and other climate disasters. And seed banks also preserve genetic diversity that is so crucial for healthy species and are one of the least expensive conservation tools because seeds are small and many seeds can be fit into relatively small storage spaces. And they represent large quantities of plants of many varieties that can be available in the future. So the indigenous Hawaiians as many indigenous people around the world had oral traditions of storytelling that pass on through the generations the wisdom and knowledge of the ancestors that spoke to our intimate connection to the sacred. And this form of storytelling in Hawaii is called mo'olelo. And Native Hawaiian lives were connected to the land, the seas, the verdant forests, all the elements of a thriving community, such as agriculture, recreation, clothing, shelter, song, and dance, and spiritual traditions were provided by the natural world. The ocean and forests provided sustenance, fish, shellfish, and kelp from the sea, and ducks and birds and eggs from the forest, augmenting a diet that was based on abundant fruits and vegetables. And poi made from the taro plant was the main staple, along with sweet potatoes, breadfruit, bananas, and the very important coconut. So Hawaii is blessed to be in a tropical zone. That means there really is an abundance of local foods that can and must be brought back to feed the local people. Hawaii used to be an agrarian culture that was able to support the people, and they didn't import the majority of the food as it's done today. And it's important to help the people understand the need to return to their connection to nature and the land, and to learn how to grow their own food. Now, Hawaii is quite urban, but also suburban, and there are growing numbers of small farms. And there are many innovative ways that people, can develop their community gardens, as they are doing not only in Hawaii, but in many cities across the United States and elsewhere, that bring neighborhoods together and ensure our continuity of connectivity to each other. And, growing people's own herbs in their own apartments. So we also have stories of urban agriculture that are going high rise. And so, these innovative ways that people are looking to have the reconnection to the land and the importance of self-sustainability is going to be very important, because if we rely on all of these, global networks, what happens when they go down? We have to be able to have the local people, the community-based connectivity, so we are present to help to support each other for our own survivability. So we can empower ourselves to be with the beauty of nature and to help grow life through our own food sources. And I think this is very important to do, and we are planning that already in light of the many climate changes that we see, to be able to reinforce and empower communities to be able to survive. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Audrey. And now Dr. Anita Sanchez.
Thank you all. It's just really, I could just stay smiling from ear to ear the whole time, seeing your faces and knowing the ancestors that you come from, just imagining how proud and how many we're impacting in the future. So thank you so much. I think this question is such a powerful one, and I'm going to speak of it personally. But when I say personally, my teaching as Nawa Aztec, and I've also most recently been learning about the Amazonian part of me, which I did not have stories until I started going there in 2007. So I'm going to share a story about my grandmother. And I was 4, my older sister was 7, my little sister was 2. And we loved being with my grandmother. My abuelita, she's Nawa, which many people know as Aztec. And she would teach us all sorts of things, but rarely debriefed anything. She just really respected that we had the internal wisdom to understand, even that early. So we went over to her for the weekend, and she said, all right, every hour, I'm going to get up before dark on Saturday, and we're going to go out to my garden, which we planted the garden earlier in the spring, and it's August, it's in the Midwest, it's humid, and we go out in the dark, and every hour for 5 minutes, we were to stand there in silence and be with the sunflowers. And so these were the very sunflowers that we planted. And so we went out there, and it was dark, and then the sun rose, and I could feel the sun, and we just stood there for 5 minutes quiet, being with the sunflowers. And as you could imagine, Every hour for 5 minutes, we went back there and were quiet. And we were turning all day long because the sunflower knows to follow the sun. And so we felt this relationship that started with the seed, that the earth and the cosmos, the sun, bringing the information to that plant, and we moved all day long. And I remember even at age 4, I didn't want to go in for lunch because there was something was happening. And that always was true with my grandmother. And then it became dark and we went in to eat. And then she said, okay, come on. And I'm like, there's no moon out. It's really dark. She grabbed the flashlight but didn't turn it on. And we all went out there by the garden. And then she turned towards the ground, turned on the light, and we were all in a circle, the 4 of us. And then she pointed the light over to the garden with the sunflowers, and all the sunflowers were looking at each other. She never debriefed it. We went back in, and to this day, I share that story. And that story means my very survival. It means my relationship and knowing of the unity and oneness with all of life, and many, many more things. And I share that from the C-suite to the middle of communities, nonprofits, wherever I go. My grandmother, with no formal education, is probably the brightest person I've ever met in the world. And every moment I was with her and my mom, they were passing down from their grandmothers, from their grandmothers, from their grandmothers, the whole tradition of using herbs, of planting seeds. And so to this day, I'm not a big gardener, but I do save seeds. And I love going to our indigenous gatherings in different places every fall where we exchange seeds. And it means our very democracy, our sovereignty as well. Because as we start modifying these seeds, do we all understand? I can feel it as a 4-year-old. Oh my gosh, when you modify them, you've changed the knowledge that has come through the earth, through the cosmos from the sun. And we've blocked that. And then we're putting that in ourselves. And what is it doing to all the animals and the water and everything? And we're beginning to know that. So just as the others of you are saying, the earth is rising. The 2-leggeds are becoming aware. Now, some of us may not feel as fast enough, but nonetheless, it's moving. And the earth, it's not just us. It's not human-centric. As we begin to understand, as I was always taught, you are never alone, Anita. You might get lonely. That's a human condition. But just like the seeds, there are hardships that happen. We know genocide is something that not only happened past to Indigenous people, but is continuing on. But they forgot. They tried to bury us, but they forgot we were seeds. So this topic, this conversation is about our very democracy, our rights to a life and for future lives, not only for 2-leggeds, but for all our relatives. And it means joy and responsibility, because I can't think of seeds and not smile. And I have a few of the plants behind me, some mint and some sage from my garden, and I have salapanto. I have the different medicines that we use. So this is about life. And so I am just so honored to be here. Thank you. Aho.
Thank you, Anita. That was an extraordinary story about your grandmother. And I must share with all of you that about 8 years ago, I was invited to be with the Brahma Kumaris in Ahmedabad in India. They are a sect that emerged out of Hinduism. And one of the things that happened while I was there was that every hour, 5 minutes before the next hour, a bell would ring and everybody would go silent. It was like almost a frozen frame of humanity. Nobody would talk if people were in the middle of a conversation or on the phone or whatever it was. Everything would just stop. And I asked them, what's that about? And they said, it's traffic control. So we can have a direct connection with the divine to remember who we are. And when you talked about the sunflowers moving and turning and then every 5 minutes being silent, I thought, these are perennial wisdoms that cut across all cultures, across all boundaries, and they show up in maybe a little different variations, and different ways, but it's basically the same idea of that connection to the earth and to divine source. So that was terrific. Thank you. That was part one. I hope you asked yourself that, and we can talk about that later. What is your personal story? Let's go to part two, and then we'll have time for discussion at the end. Welcome. Today you're going to hear a woman's perspective on saving seeds and storytelling for survival. Historically, women have had a very vital role in sustaining civilization, but that role has been vastly underrated. Actually, women have been responsible for reconstituting and revitalizing societies that have been perhaps doomed if it had not been for their ability to save seeds and to tell stories. So the second question is, what do you think constitutes the main threat to saving seeds and storytelling in our time? How would you describe the main threat? Audrey, would you like to go first?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ruth. Well, obviously, the main threat is climate change and how it is impacting, people everywhere around the world, but not just people, our relatives in the plant and animal kingdoms as well. But I wanted to share about this really wonderful project that is being spearheaded by this powerful indigenous Hawaiian lady who is also a professor at the University of Hawaii named Manulani Aluli Nair. And she has started a food sovereignty movement with coconuts. And the coconut, or niu in Hawaiian, is called the tree of life because it provided food, mulch, construction materials, and medicine. And it was a source of clean water, coconut water that is so life-sustaining and nourishing. And it also sustained the historic voyagers on long canoe trips. But of course, with the advent of tourism, the coconut tree began to be seen as a dangerous liability because the coconuts could fall and injure people. And as a result, all of the coconuts have been removed from the trees you see today in Waikiki and other tourist districts. So this is really kind of a sad metaphor for the devaluing of the coconut in the local culture. And Manulani and her partner, Indrajit Gunasekera, created the Niu Now movement. And coconuts are being cultivated in seedling farms and given away free to local residents to plant in their gardens. And in addition to cultivating coconuts, Niu Now is resurrecting the cultural traditions associated with the Niu. And as a remote island community that imports the majority of its food to Hawaii. Hawaii is at really great risk for food insecurity. And the Niu Now offers a simple, sustainable solution based really on indigenous women. And I should say, and also indigenous wisdom. And this indigenous wisdom is deeply intertwined with people's sacred relationality to the divine spirit, which took the form of the gods and goddesses that reign over the natural elements and the forces of people's lives. So, for example, Kane was a divine creator and the god of light. And Lono was a god of fertility, agriculture, rainfall, music, and peace. And the indigenous people gave great respect to these deities and always began with prayer and offerings of gratitude. And gratitude is such an important element, not only traditionally, historically, but every day that we live. So really expressing appreciation to our sacred relationality to nature and to each other. And their relationship with the divine was expressed through nature and was inextricably intertwined with their everyday lives and really ensured a sustainable copacetic relationship with nature that was not only a deeply sacred relationship, but it manifested environmental preservation and living harmoniously with and in nature. So the New Now movement is going far beyond cultivating coconuts. It is reconnecting the people of Hawaii to an important element of their cultural heritage, and that is sacred relationality, the return and the remembrance of our consciousness, our hearts, our minds, and our spirits to our connection to the divine source. Very powerful work, and the many stories that are generated from the indigenous people, and of course, all of our traditions. And I think that this is something that we need to bring to the forefront of the consciousness of everyone, our sacred relationality to the environment, to each other, and the divine source. So thank you.
That was so special to hear about what's going on in Hawaii. I'm going to ask Claire to go next. Can you please tell us, Claire, what do you think constitutes the greatest threat?
I think in terms of storytelling and seed saving, I would say that on the external level, I would echo Audrey's word about the climate change as a huge threat in a global sense. First of all, climate change will change agriculture. And for small island states that are going to be find their water tables inundated, or for small island states who are visited with a hurricane or flood or something, or a drought with increasing frequency, there's a lot of the, let's say, from a scientific perspective, that is very much frightening, if you will. And for me, the background to that, stepping back and looking at this idea of sacred relationality, I think that in many ways in the Caribbean, we have lost a sense of what it is to have a sacred relationship to earth. And I say that because, first of all, when you think about agriculture, the Caribbean people, agriculture is not seen as a noble job. Agriculture is a daily reminder of slavery. Agriculture is a daily reminder of pain and suffering. And we have not done a sufficiently good job, from my perspective, of telling stories about our enslaved ancestors and taking enough pride in the fact that they survived, they thrived, they allowed the great European economies to be on top of everybody else in the world. And yes, you may not have been thanked for it back then, but certainly you can position yourself in the story of where we are in a different way. And I think for me, what needs to happen and what I'm trying to grapple with, and actually a couple for Caribbean American Heritage Month, I try to have a conversation on the role of the faith community in environmental stewardship. I've been trying to push this, but I'm getting more aggressive because I'm so terrified that the Caribbean Sea, for one, is on a severe threat of being killed. I mean, it's extremely sick right now. And so for me, I think there needs to be a reawakening of what it is to go back and fetch from history that which matters, that which counts, and understand that while we may not have counted in a way we would have wanted to be counted, we have to go back and put a metric that matters to demonstrate that the work that our ancestors did, whether it's in the sugarcane fields or the banana plantations, the work they did to bring the yams and the ground provisions from Africa in those ships, the work that they did to ensure that we found ways to use, the worst of the provisions to create interesting and exciting foods that now grace the finest tables. All these stories need to be retold in a way that give them honor, and that we see that it's not our shame that we were enslaved. We should not bear that shame. I think, unfortunately, we don't have enough people telling that story. And that is why I really have latched on to storytelling as a part of my work, and why I use storytelling. And I try as a futurist to always use a story to engage the audience, not just the fact of what is the technical thing I'm trying to push out, but what is the story of what it is we're trying to create in the future. And then I can say, and this is why, and I explain the roots of that story. So for me, it is, how can I and others who might believe as I do in the Caribbean region begin to increase and strengthen the notion that we all have a sacred relationship to the environment in a way that will help to increase and strengthen our very fragile environmental movement, very fragile and very weak environmental movement.
Anita.
I'm in very much agreement with Audrey and Dr. Claire. I think the biggest threat is the spiritual disconnection that we have to ourselves, to the earth, to each other, to all the relatives in the hoop of life. There is one hoop of life, and you can see I'm keeping my arms flat. It's not higher, it's flat. No one's higher, no one's lower. People, earth, and all the other beings that are part of that, and spirit, this is all one. And we've forgotten that. And so the whole issue of global warming, this began because even before the seeds were being destroyed by Monsanto. This happened before, where human beings, the two ladies, began to separate, to take on this other notion of separateness, of higher than and lower than, class, the different things that people are talking about, what's valued and not. And as that happened, it allowed organizations like the GMO, the people who created the genetic modified organisms, and that to occur. And so what needs to happen is that reconnection. And I'll just share a quick little story, because once a year, I'm a board member of Pachamama Alliance, and we focus very much on primary rainforests and the Amazon in particular, and also pioneers that started as a Seeds of Change, a treasurer of that board for many years. And when I go to the Amazon and I take once a year people in to remember, and that's what it is, of remembering. We're not at fault. We're not lacking. We just need to remember who we are and what we are. The first thing that happens when they get off that little plane and about to start to walk and they get on their little canoes and all of that, immediately people going, what is that? What is that? I mean, they're awed by the green and the diversity. It's just so much to take in. However, they're seeing it at a very basic level. And they said, well, you know, this doesn't ache as much. What's going on? And it's called oxygen. It's called oxygen, that these plants, we can't have pure oxygen. We would die. Our bodies can't handle pure. But it is the cleanest air in the sacred headwaters where I take people. The journeyers begin to say is, wait a minute, these Ashwar, these Sapara people, am I hearing translation right? They're not talking about being in the rainforest or living in the rainforest. They talk about themselves as being part of the rainforest. Just imagine what it would be if we got back our spiritual connection and stopped talking about nature as if it's out there. Nature's in here. Everything. We know that from science. So this is not only our indigenous wisdom, who were the first scientists and all over the world. We know that from our keen observation that we are part of nature. So every element is in us, and every element that is held sacred and relationship external, there's a reciprocity. And so that forgetfulness about who we are and what we are as spiritual beings, physical, mental, and emotional, when we understand that oneness, then we're able to be in unity and life-giving members in this one hoop of life, rather than forgetting and then causing destruction, or any decisions better than no decision. And then we come up with these crazy things that hurt more. So this is a critical spiritual thing. And it's not only for me and now, it's about all of us, because we're all relatives. Then we will not be able to stay in this illusion of separateness. That these stories, no matter where they come from the islands, or from Hawaii, another island, or Mexico, or India, wherever they are, we know, even if I never meet those people, or the trees that are there, or the particular earth that's there, or the waters, it is all connected. And then I can move, knowing, not only as an individual, but a collective group with the Bioneers, Pachamama, and the many groups that you all are a part of, and the millions more, to change this, for us to remember our sacred relationship to ourselves, to other two-leggeds, and to all our relatives.
Thank you. It's so
Excuse me,
ironic,
Ruth.
though, that you're taking
Yes.
people to the Amazon where they can experience all that. At the same time, the Amazon is being threatened, the lungs of the universe, and the contrast between what you're teaching and what people are experiencing, and on one hand, and what's being destroyed at the same time in the same area, is so stark and scary. And that's why this workshop today, this webinar, is so important to have all of you share from your own experience and tradition, and from your understanding of the future, what is needed. So,
I agree with you, Ruth. I agree so much. And when people come back, they begin implementing what they saw there, here. And that's what we have to do in every backyard and collectively with all these organizations to make this relationship that's spiritual true.
Well, speaking about spirituality, or the lack thereof, is really at the root, like you say, of what we're facing. And it's been problematic, particularly since Descartes in the 1700s, when we went to a totally materialistic, so-called scientific worldview that separated us from who we really are. And you talked about source, and I love the word, divine source. And I like to use the word a nurturing force for good in the universe, because it expands us out into this idea that we are one with everything. It's all within, and the divine is within us, and we can draw from that. And all of nature is part of that, wholeness. Climate change sounds so abstract because it's out there. It's a scientific term, and we know it is destructive. But what has caused the destruction is the greed. It's you call two-legged. Let's say it's mankind that's caused this abuse of nature and the devastation of natural resources, the trees, the forest in the Amazon in Brazil, the dependence upon petrofuels, and the wars and all the problems that those battles are causing globally. The expansionist attitude that, countries need to have more land, and so they start wars in order to take more land, but in the process are devastating the breadbasket of the world right now. And everywhere where war is going on, we're creating tremendous pollution problems and adding to climate change, even as we seek to reduce it.
Strip the forest of their trees. You have robbed the coral from the sea. honeybees. You're to blame, bear the shame, it's not a game. You have hungry children left to feed. You consume resources you don't need, and you justify your global greed. You're to blame, bear the shame, it's not a game. What have you done to the earth, my friend? Where did you go wrong? What will your life be worth, my friends, when the snow cannot sing her sweet song? What have you done to your souls, my friends? You cannot make things whole, my friends, if you are living just for today.
What's the cost of this little onslaught? What's the lot of the cattle that we slaughter just to keep on top? Lost are the errors of the wild and free. Now we face the brink of the next Pleistocene, and the scene is grim. The odds of our survival run from low to slim. And you can leverage the forest for recordings and a mortgage. I think those who came before us raise their voices like a chorus. Consider the rivers that once flowed here. Now it's just concrete and corner stores here. We used to set feet on the sticks and stones. Now they clothe them in plastic and hiding out our homes. We used to roam, we didn't need to go wrong. You wanted a factory, the ground provided the coals. All came at a cost. Humanity, what we lost, turned living trees into law to make it to building blocks.
The swallow cannot sing her sweet song. What to your souls, my friends? We have lost our way. You cannot make things whole, my friends. If you are living just for today, just for today.
So we have to change the value system, and that happens by remembering who we are, by reconnecting spiritually, and to practice what the teachings are that we've all had. My book it's all in the frijoles, because the story behind that is I asked my mother when she was dying what had made her so strong. And I was expecting, paragraphs of wisdom. And she said, beans have made me strong. And I thought about that and I was very disappointed. Well, 8 months later, I'm making the beans the way we do. And you wash the beans, you spread them out on a tray or a platter, and you take out all the shriveled or discolored or imperfect beans, because a bad bean can spoil the pot. And so you don't want, some ugly beans in there. And you sort them out. And so I realized that was the idea of sorting the better from the lesser, the what is desired and what is not desired, and you make a perfect pot of beans that way. And it's a discipline, it's an act of fortitude, and you develop a lot of patience when you're going through sorting. A big pile is a big pile if you do 2 cups of beans, and these things are being lost. And so there's abuse and overuse and all the rest of these situations, which is why I love getting back to the virtues, the virtue of, teaching, storytelling, and teaching us to remember who we really are. If we were taught that in the beginning, you are made in the image and likeness of a divine, source, let's call it, God, Allah, Yahweh, Charlie, it doesn't really matter, Buddha, whatever it is, it's the thing itself, whatever it is a nurturing source for good in the world. And that is where we have to shift. And so in the taking in of the seeds of wisdom, I like to use the metaphor, the seeds of wisdom that we need to replace our daily thinking with it as individuals. Many have it. People are working from these premises of wholeness, of at one-ment with divine source. It's not atonement, it's at one-ment. And the stepping into these principles of living, the virtues, are very, very important. I think most important that my mother stressed was faith. And I love the quote in the Bible, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. And with faith comes fortitude. And fortitude is what we need to pursue justice, to stand up for what is right and good. My mother told me that if you see anything that's wrong, anything that is unjust, it's your responsibility and duty to do something about it. Well, that stayed with me. And so every time something unjust happened, women's movement, I got into it. We had to combat the prejudice and the discrimination against women and minorities. And, now, all the other things that have to be, adjusted so that we accept the uniqueness and divineness of every single human being on the planet.
Thank you so much. I realize we're out of time for responses.
Well, Ruth, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for this incredible presentation, which we're going to pick up next week for the next part of it. And maybe there'll be opportunities then where people can comment. I guess we're going to...
Let me just mention the names of the next two
Yes.
parts called Seeding the Future and how to engage in partnership with men.
Okay. Will there be opportunities then next week for people to have responses or questions?
Yes, I will not do an introduction next week. I will just go right into parts 3 and 4, and they're a little bit shorter than these first two parts. So yes, there will be an opportunity. And also, write me if you want. And it was such a privilege to work with the women and to share this. And it was shared with the entire Parliament audience, people from all over the world who attended the conference in August. So, and one of the people that also presented with me at the conference is here today, Heidi, who you heard from Think Round a few weeks ago. So thank you all for listening, and I really am eager to hear your comments.